This video is sponsored by Webull, where you can get up to $1,850 in free stocks when you sign up and deposit $100. Go to metkevin.com/Webull or click the link down below. Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Last week I had the most incredible opportunity to speak directly with Sandy Munro from Munro & Associates. Sandy Munro is an expert engineer on custom vehicles and consulting for vehicle manufacturing. And especially since I personally, and many of us who watch this channel, have a lot of money invested into the electric vehicle space, I wanted to kind of look back at some of the notes that I took from the interview with Sandy Munro. Keep in mind, when I do interviews, I take notes not only to reference them in the future, but I also take notes because oftentimes something that somebody says is something that I want to ask a follow-up question on. And so you'll regularly see me in that interview refer back and say, hey, but you just said this. How does that relate to this? And that, in my opinion, is really important when interviewing. Okay, so I've got my notes up, and I'm going to go through some of the really neat things that I learned. Not too terribly much on Lucid from Sandy Munro. He hasn't done a breakdown on those vehicles yet, and I respect him for not touching on something he hasn't gone deep on yet. So I think that is very respectable, but I want to give Lucid a shout out here because you might be wondering. What I do think is very cool about what Sandy Munro says is he is almost confident that Tesla is 10 years ahead on self-driving technology. This is something I mean, I don't know if I can put a number on how far ahead Tesla is, but as a Tesla owner and having had a lot of issues with my Tesla in 2017 and seeing how the software has graduated, I can tell you it's a climb. It is a path, like it is a struggle to get full self-driving moving, or even the self-driving that we have now where you gotta fully pay attention and the car can't do everything yet with the exception of the beta systems, which are in beta. I don't have the beta yet, but I've seen videos of it, it's amazing. I would venture to say Tesla is at least 3 years ahead of the competition. I don't know about 10, but hey, Sandy's the expert in this, so this is no shade on Sandy. This is just me agreeing that I definitely think Tesla is far ahead of the competition. And this is actually one of the concerns that I have for Lucid. Lucid says that they're going to be level 3 autonomous ready, but I don't know which platform they're going to use. Who are they going to partner with to do this? Who's going to provide their autonomous chips? Who's going to provide, are they using LiDAR sensors? If so, who's providing that? I'd like to know those details, and I don't have those details yet. But I do agree, Tesla is far ahead with the autonomous. And folks, one of the things I've always said on this channel is the value of an EV manufacturer is not the fact that they can slap batteries on the car, it's the fact that they can slap batteries on a car and have autonomous driving. That is the future. Whether we look towards Robo Taxis or what, the future is self-driving vehicles, and a company that does that well is a company I want to invest in. This is one of the reasons I'm also investing in NIO. Though it's a smaller portion of my portfolio, I do invest in NIO as well. And as much as Sandy Munro does not like the legacy automakers, which we'll talk about in a moment, I have to say, GM, out of all of them, and the Chevy, well, it's not Chevy, the Cruise department, which is an entire company that was actually bought by GM that is now under the GM umbrella. That company solely works on autonomous driving tech. They've got like 30,000 employees now, which I think they've like 15x their employee count. And that company got an investment from Microsoft, and that Cruise company within GM has like a $30 billion valuation, which is almost half of GM's total valuation. That company inside GM has a lot of promise to me. Like, I wouldn't be shocked in the future if Cruise is more valuable than the parent company, GM. We'll see. Pay attention to GM, though, because of that. So, love the argument on the autonomous driving system. And I think we didn't talk about it too terribly much, but I will say it is the most valuable part of an EV manufacturer. So I'm excited about that, and I really want to highlight that. Now, let's talk about the discussion about manufacturing. So I brought up the Lego example because in Sandy Munro's interview with Elon Musk talked about how Elon's able to reduce 30% of the size of his factory facilities by having castings that basically automatically put together somewhere around 170 parts into one part, so saving 169 parts. Something that I didn't think about and that I really respected getting this insight from Sandy Munro is he makes a really good point that when you have metal and you have a bunch of different metal pieces, you have to bolt those pieces together. Bolts need washers in between them. You have to, in certain places, weld those pieces together, and welds can break. Sometimes ships sink because the welds break, and there are rivets in places, and I'm not a manufacturing expert here, but based on what Sandy's saying, by suggesting, look, we get rid of all of those potential quality issues by turning it into one piece, that is huge for a manufacturer. And nobody else is doing this. And that's a reason Sandy Munro thinks that Tesla is 5 years ahead of everybody else. He loves what Tesla is doing. If anything, Sandy is looking at what Tesla's doing, and he's trying to teach other companies how to do the same thing, and because that's what he does. He's an automotive manufacturing advisor and an aerospace engineering advisor as well. And when I followed up on this and I asked, well, who's going to catch up? He said, dude, you can't. You can't catch up to Tesla. You're always going to be number 2. This was another big takeaway here. It's that, look, Tesla might be years ahead of others, but the thing is, they keep improving on the stuff they have now while other people are playing catch up. And this is something that I think is really, really powerful to hear as a Tesla investor. Now, I'm always cautious and skeptical because I don't want to be the investor that's like blind faith, like, oh yeah, I only want to hear the positive about Tesla. Obviously, I want to hear positive things about Tesla. I don't like that Sandy Munro said he doesn't invest in Tesla stock anymore. I don't know if that's, because of contractual obligations or because of some personal beliefs he has. I have no idea. I couldn't get anything other than positive out of him. So in my opinion, I did feel a little bit of potentially cognitive dissonance here, where you kind of have two competing beliefs. So that was a little confusing to me. I didn't really understand that. But either way, it sounds like everything Sandy Munro is mentioning is absolutely brilliant regarding Tesla, and I love that. But I did also kind of slam Tesla, and this is where I like to bring up follow-ups. And I said, well, what about the quality control? Why are we having so many issues at Tesla? And I've previously theorized on this channel that the reason Tesla hasn't had the perfect quality control is because they're trying to get to mass market so fast. They're basically trying to say, look, 90% is still an A. Let's go. We'll fix the problems in time, but let's go. We don't have 15 years to create something perfect. We got to go, 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 sell, 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 create something that's good enough for the mass market, and then we'll improve over time. Sandy Munro kind of agreed with this analogy. Now, while he didn't know what my analogy was, when I asked the question, Sandy Munro stated, well, that's just Elon being cheap. And in other words, they didn't take the time to hire the correct advisors to make sure that Tesla was doing all the right things at all the right levels of the process. This is really interesting because obviously Sandy Munro is an advisor, so a little bit it's a pitch for people like Sandy Munro because it's like, hey, you need smart people coming into the factory line and going, yo, dude, no, stop doing the welds like this, do them like this. And this is true. I agree with Sandy that people like Sandy are extremely critical in the manufacturing process because if you perfect the manufacturing process up front, then when you copy and paste it, you're copy and pasting quality rather than imperfection. And Tesla has had a reputation for imperfection, and I'm not like major imperfection. We're talking about like fog and lights, which can be expensive, panel gaps. When my Falcon doors opened, the first time it rained here in Southern California, the rain would funnel down the middle of sort of this gap they have at the top of the Falcon door, and then it would funnel into and start shooting into the car from the sides, and it would basically rain into my car seats when I opened up the Falcon door. Needless to say, that should not happen, and Tesla did fix that problem, but it was one of my frustrations with Tesla as well. I had a lot of frustrations with Tesla. The quality control it's gotten better, okay? Let's put it that way. Now, moving on, Sandy Munro also goes on to touch on LiDAR, which I really appreciated this. He does not believe that LiDAR is the future. He actually nicknames it LiDAR. And I don't think he was mispronouncing it. I think he's basically calling it stupid dar. So he's not very enthusiastic about LiDAR. I think for Sandy Munro, he believes that in the future, we're going to look at something more like a FLIR type technology where we use infrared to kind of 3D map locations in front of us. Currently, Tesla does not do that. So I don't know, is this potentially the Tesla Achilles heel? And is that maybe why Sandy Munro isn't investing? Keep in mind that Tesla is a manufacturer that says, we just want to perfect this camera and radar technology and getting this working. They're the only one doing this. Everybody else is using, as Elon Musk says, the crux of LiDAR. Everybody else is not doing what Tesla's doing. And so it makes you wonder, does that mean Tesla's doing it right and they're the only one who's figured it out? Or is Tesla gonna end up hitting a brick wall and go, oh crap, now we have to adapt? Either way, I have no concern for Tesla in this, because in my opinion, Tesla could simply just buy microvision. They could install LiDAR in the mirrors, like you put a new mirror unit in at the front of the car. Now you have forward-facing LiDAR. Perfect. Now you got the crux, as Elon Musk says. But then you solve the problem, you know? Then you have LiDAR, forward-facing LiDAR. We'll see. I threw this in here because this came up as well, just in the sort of the manufacturing talk. This was really a Nano Dimension question. I asked him what he thought about 3D printing, because I've outlined my thesis on Nano Dimension, and it's actually, even though the stock has done so incredibly well, and I'm so happy for that. I think there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm about the stock. ARK investors in it. It's not a stock that personally I've been very, very, very long run excited about. Mostly because I'm worried about 3D printing not being something that could be commercially viable, that it's maybe really good for research purposes instead. And I said that. You could check out my Nano Dimension video. Look, that doesn't mean that every research institution in the world won't end up buying a Nano Dimension machine and they end up crushing revenues, right? Like maybe they're just a company that they're not going to mass manufacture these 3D printers, but they're going to sell a crap ton of them and make a lot of money. And that is one reason I really like Nano Dimension. It's not in my portfolio. Obviously, from when I made the video, I wish it was. I was very bullish on the company, but I also gave my concerns. And I brought this up with Sandy. And he mentioned the problem with 3D printing is that it's slow, and that's it. It's really good for making one-offs, like one-off examples or templates or test products, but it's really good, it's really bad for mass manufacturing. And so if you're in Nano Dimension, that's a reason to pay attention to Nano Dimension to see if they could speed that process up. Really, really important. Then we touched a little bit about luxury cars, which is something that Lucid is starting with, versus doing this race to the bottom of the $25,000 car. Sandy Munro had a very strong belief that back in that history is our best teacher, basically. That back in the day, nobody believed that making an inexpensive car would be profitable. And that's one of the reasons the United States said, whatever, let Japan just do the cheap cars. And look at what's on the road now. Hyundai, Honda, Toyotas, these cars that are high quality cars at a low price. Very well done. And they're foreign cars. And they're absolutely phenomenal. And so Sandy Munro says, history told us that was a big mistake. And that if you focus on luxury buyers, at some point you're going to run out of luxury buyers. And even though they can be impressive, really the way to make money is by selling to the mass market. And that's actually what Tesla is doing. That's exactly what Tesla's doing. And Lucid plans to go down that same trajectory. They're going to start with their luxury car, then they're going to work their way down to less expensive cars. Okay, then we have, I asked about Archimoto. I said, look, seems like a fun car. I'm going to try it out soon. I want to know what's taking so long. Why have we been, 13 years in the process, and what's taking so long? And Sandy Munro actually said, hey, look, he's working with them to get to mass building right now. And that the vehicles that Archimoto has right now are not capable of mass production. And so they have to make changes to get to mass production. So this is going to be interesting. I'm going to pay attention to Archimoto. It's possible that Archimoto in the short term could have a little bit of suffering in its stock because of this transition. Anytime you get a transition from this is what we're doing now to a completely new process, you generally suffer on margin and you end up basically having to rebuild from a lower point. So pay attention to that. I thought that was a really good signal to watch for Archimoto. Then I asked him about battery technology, and Sandy Munro believes that the 4680 cell, which is Tesla's new cell for their Plaid editions, is going to end up clobbering everyone, is what he says. He's very, very bullish on these new battery cells. Super excited. Loves that they get cooled from the bottom, which he says is how you should cool a battery. Absolutely great. Then he touches on quantum, and he really calls this totally different technology. And he says in the future, solid-state batteries will leave everything else in the dust. In fact, solid-state batteries are going to be things that we're going to want to end up using for electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that will have much lighter weight batteries that'll give them higher speed, more power, and be able to travel further distances. Alternatively, the other option to solid-state batteries for flying vehicles could be hydrogen. Sandy Munro is very bullish on hydrogen. I asked a couple times because my thesis is that hydrogen is not going to be popular until 2030. And he says, look, hydrogen's not for everyone. He didn't really give me a time frame in terms of when hydrogen might be popular. It does seem like he thinks it's going to be at least 5+ years until hydrogen's more popular. But he says the perfect market for hydrogen is actually big rigs and electric VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. But that they should do something like tank swapping instead of you have to stand there with a nozzle and fill it up. I'm not exactly sure why he was very bullish on like tank swapping, where you put in like here's your new hydrogen tank and it swaps out the old one, kind of like Neo's battery swapping tech. I'm not sure why he was anti the nozzle. We had a very limited amount of time. I mean, I shouldn't say very limited amount of time. We had an hour and 10 minutes. I mean, we could have talked to Sandy for 2 or 3 hours. Not that we would have wanted to do that all in one sitting anyway, but I'd like to ask Sandy more about why no nozzle? What's the difference? Is it because you lose that potential compressiveness that you have with the hydrogen? Do you lose too much energy in that transfer? I don't know. Now, regarding the Tesla Semi, Sandy Munro actually thinks that Elon Musk is wrong on hydrogen and that hydrogen is going to end up being the better product for something like a Tesla semi-truck. That you should have, because with hydrogen you have a fuel cell and you need batteries anyway. The fuel cell charges the battery, basically. He thinks that Elon Musk is wrong here and that essentially in the Tesla Semi you should probably have some mix of hydrogen and electricity. Which, in my opinion, it's very likely that if we actually have hydrogen infrastructure in the future, that'll be an easy change for Tesla to make, and who cares if Elon changes his mind. But the big problem right now is we don't have hydrogen infrastructure. So we can't really expect to have all this, these hydrogen vehicles on the road when we don't even have the hydrogen infrastructure. Like, where are you going to fuel it these days? There's so few places you could fuel up. On this, he thinks we're way behind the curve. He thinks that Europe's already on this, China's already on this, Japan's doing like the hydrogen highway. Like, the United States is going to need a big governmental effort to push hydrogen to really get this moving. I also learned that you should not call electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles drones. Apparently calling them drones is offensive. Good to know. And that he's very bullish on electric vehicle takeoff and landing units, these eVTOLs. And the reason is he says, look, Robo Taxis are going to be great. And I'm summarizing here. I'm putting this into my own words. Robo Taxis are going to be great, but they're really going to be a short-term solution to a long-term problem. The long-term solution is taking advantage of the third dimension, being able to fly up and down and then move forward and backwards and left and right. And the beauty about that is you'll have so much more space between flying vehicles that autonomous flying capabilities would substantially be capable of keeping and maintaining proper distances from other vehicles, because you have so many different layers that you could fly in. You're no longer just on one layer. You have multiple different tiers in the sky that you could fly in. And a really good example of this that we actually talked about in the Millennial Money podcast, a new podcast between myself and some of my buddies, Jeremy, Andre, and Graham. We talked about how Amazon robots at the factories from like 5 years ago, these things in some of the factories, they move with such precision, inches from each other, in a completely autonomous way. There's really no reason for us not to have this autonomy come to flying vehicles as well in the future. Now, the Amazon bots, they use QR codes on the floor, so obviously there's still work to be done. But very exciting prospects into electric vehicle or VTOLs. And it's gotten me excited to look into more. I'm not so jumping up and down about the company Archer, for example, though, because their United partnership is a joke. United's basically getting paid hundreds of millions of dollars to make the partnership. This is my research. And I think that's probably why the stock isn't trading for more than $16 right now. We'll see what happens in the long term. Long run, I think the eVTOLs are going to be a really cool option. I do think there's a potential that right now they're a little too hypey, and that We are still 3 to 4 years out from actually having the right technology to use these in a mainstream way. So maybe the better time to buy these eVTOL stocks would be closer to like 2 years from now. When I asked Sandy about Apple, he kind of blushed and bluntly dodged the question by saying next question. So it's obviously likely that Sandy Munro is under some kind of NDA where he can't speak about Apple because he's advising Apple. But knowing Apple, honestly, they probably hire every advisor they can, and they do a lot of waiting and thinking. Whereas Elon Musk is, let's get to the market and then think about it. You've got really big differences in personality here of company. And I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong, but I personally do think it's gonna be a while before Apple gets around and actually has a car out here. We'll see. One other thing that I thought was really interesting from Sandy Munro is he bagged on battery swapping. He thought it was stupid. He says, by the time you swap a battery, you could just have charged up at a supercharger. And NIO is working on their second version of battery swapping technology. They are working on speeding that up and getting more of these units out. Battery swapping is something that did fail in the United States, at least per Elon Musk. Who knows? Maybe he didn't really give it a full shot. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where battery swapping goes and NIO goes in the future. So this is kind of my overview here of my conversation with Sandy. I want to say this in sort of a summary. What I got from Sandy is strong bullishness on Tesla, that we're still years away from vertical takeoff and landing, but that we should pay attention to it. That we're still many more years away from hydrogen, but that hydrogen is going to be really powerful for big rigs and possibly even VTOLs. I also am going to be a little bit more skeptical on battery swapping, and I'm going to pay attention to this a little bit more. And I'm fascinated to see Tesla continue to redesign their manufacturing process to save money. I have to say, this was a very, very fun interview. I've had a lot of fun interviews. I'm constantly looking and talking to folks to see who we could bring on the channel as a guest. But Sandy Munro, huge thank you, Sandy Munro, for coming on. For anybody watching this, thank you so much for watching and your support. Hopefully you appreciated the summary and sort of Kevin's reaction to this. And folks, we'll see you in the next video.